I'm Valerie, 39, and I still can't fully process what my parents did to my daughter Leah. After years of saving every spare dollar for college, my sweet 18-year-old was persuaded by her grandparents to hand over her entire $42,000 fund, told it was for an emergency heart procedure. 2 weeks later, I learned they'd gifted $37,000 to my niece Kayla for a luxury SUV and a spring tour through Europe. Leah was crushed, her trust, her sacrifices all tossed aside. But instead of exploding with rage, I chose a quieter form of justice, one they never saw coming. Before I dive deeper, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to protect your kids from your own family, hit like and subscribe. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa in the late 80s, the daughter of Robert and Elaine Carson. From the outside, we look like a typical Midwestern family, but inside that house, favoritism was baked into every conversation. My younger sister Stephanie was always the star, obedient, charming, and more than happy to mirror our parents' values. I, on the other hand, questioned everything. I wasn't rebellious, I just didn't fall in line, which they took as defiance. When I met Chris at a local college mixer, it felt like someone finally heard me. We married before I turned 21 and welcomed Leah a year later. To say my parents were unimpressed would be an understatement. Stephanie, meanwhile, was finishing law school and dating Alex, a guy who wore loafers, even at the gym, and made my mother beam with pride. Chris left when Leah was 4, chasing a job offer out in California. Divorce followed, and so did late payments and broken promises. With only my pharmacy tech license and a toddler on my hip, I had to rebuild from scratch. When my mom said, "Just come home, Valerie, we'll help," I knew what she meant. Give up control. Give them access. Let them mold Leah like they couldn't mold me. I chose differently. We stayed in Omaha, rented a small duplex near a great charter school, and carved out a life on our own. Stephanie married Alex, moved into a designer home minutes from our parents, and had Kayla 2 years later. Suddenly, my parents had everything they'd ever wanted, a perfect little replica of their ideal daughter and a granddaughter they could spoil to the heavens, and that's exactly what they did. With Leah, it was always different. My parents remembered her birthday and sent a Christmas card. Sure, but there was a quiet, emotional distance they never tried to hide. When Leah came home with straight A's or won the regional science fair, my mother would murmur, "That's lovely, dear." Then quickly add, "Kayla just got accepted into the youth tennis league. Isn't that exciting?" Still, Leah blossomed into a remarkable young woman. Mature beyond her years, she began babysitting at 12, pet sitting by 14, and took a part-time job at the local bookstore by 16. Every dollar she earned went into her college fund. I matched what I could from my pharmacy tech paycheck. "Mom, I'm going to Stanford or Berkeley," she used to tell me, eyes glowing with ambition. "I just want to save enough so you won't have to stress about it." Her thoughtfulness never failed to break me and lift me up in the same breath. By senior year, thanks to scholarships, long hours of work, and frugal saving, Leah had managed to put together just over $42,000. It wasn't enough for 4 years at a top-tier school, but it was a strong foundation. And my situation had improved too. I'd finally completed my pharmacy degree through night classes, nearly doubling my income. We upgraded from our drafty duplex to a bright 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and decent public schools. Meanwhile, Stephanie and Alex seemed to live in a movie. He became a senior partner at a corporate law firm. They expanded into a 5-bedroom estate with a home theater, and Kayla, beautiful, outgoing, naturally gifted, became their trophy. She was everything my parents had ever wanted. Athletic, charming, well-connected. At family holidays, my parents hung on her every word, clapped at her every minor accomplishment. Leah. They'd offer a quick smile, ask a question about AP classes, then pivot to Kayla's tennis ranking or her latest Instagram post going viral. Still, Leah remained patient and kind, never bitter. She'd help them set up their iPhones or troubleshoot their email logins without complaint. After one Thanksgiving, where my father toasted Kayla's early admission to Georgetown but barely acknowledged Leah's scholarship award, I pulled her aside. She just smiled softly. "It's okay, Mom. Grandma and Grandpa connect more with Kayla." I'm just glad they're proud of someone. Her grace made it even harder. By winter, acceptance letters rolled in UCLA, NYU, and finally, Stanford. The night she opened that one, Leah burst into tears, throwing her arms around me. We did it, Mom. And in that moment, it really felt like we had. All those overtime shifts, late-night study sessions, and quiet sacrifices had led to this. As I hugged my brilliant, resilient daughter, I felt an overwhelming wave of pride and validation. We had made it on our own terms. No trust funds, no handouts, no shortcuts. Leah was on her way to something greater. She had built a future brick by brick, and it was finally within reach. What I didn't know was that all our careful saving was about to be undone by the very people who should have been her biggest champions. March was pure celebration in our little Omaha apartment. Acceptance letters kept arriving: Berkeley, NYU, and finally, Stanford. Even with the partial scholarship, we knew it wouldn't cover everything, but it was enough to get her started. "I'll get a job on campus," Leah said one evening as we sat crunching numbers at the kitchen table. "And I can work full-time over summer. I'll make it work." "Let's not worry about that tonight," I told her. "You've earned every bit of this. Let's just breathe it in." Later that evening, while Leah was sautéing vegetables for dinner, her phone rang. She answered with a grin, but it vanished almost instantly. "Grandpa, what's wrong? Slow down." Her voice dropped as she stepped into the living room. When she came back 20 minutes later, her face was pale, eyes wide with worry. "Mom," she whispered, "Grandpa needs heart surgery. It's urgent." He said he was crying on the phone. That alone made my stomach turn. My father wasn't the emotional type. "What surgery?" I asked carefully. He never mentioned anything was wrong. "It's sudden." He said it's some rare condition, and the procedure isn't covered by insurance. They're looking at $45,000, and they might lose the house. That familiar, nauseating tension clenched my chest. I'd heard these dramatic pleas before, always, in moments where they needed something. "Did they ask you for money?" I asked already, knowing the answer. Leah hesitated, then softly replied, "Not directly. Grandpa just said he didn't know what to do. He sounded so scared, Mom. And he reminded me they paid for my braces. The same braces they used as leverage every chance they got while lavishing Kayla with lavish trips and designer bags." "Leah, that money is for your future," I said gently. "If they're really in trouble, I'll help them figure out something." But Leah's voice cut through mine, quiet and unwavering. "I already told Grandpa I'd help. If he dies because I chose a fancy school, I couldn't live with that. I'll figure something else out." "People do it all the time," Leah said softly, her eyes scanning the transfer page on her laptop. I wanted to grab the phone and confront my father, that instant demand to know what kind of man manipulates his teenage granddaughter into handing over her future. But I also knew Leah was 18 now. An adult. Legally, it was her money. And emotionally, this was a defining moment in her connection with her grandparents. If I came down too hard, I'd risk becoming the villain in their carefully curated family narrative. "Let me talk to them first," I offered gently. "Maybe there's a way we can split the cost or find other funding." "They need it this week," Leah interrupted. "For the pre-op appointment." Grandpa said any delay could be dangerous. The urgency sounded all too familiar. But before I could say more, she had already requested a cashier's check through her online banking. The next afternoon, we drove across town to my parents' place. Their pristine brick home stood just as it always had, calm, suburban, and utterly unaffected. My mother opened the door in neatly pressed gardening clothes, her hands still dusted with soil. She looked more sun-kissed than sick. The moment she saw us, her expression changed just enough. "Oh, Leah, sweetheart," she gushed, pulling her into a hug while giving me a glance I couldn't quite decode. "You have no idea how much this means." "Where's Grandpa?" Leah asked. "Resting," she replied with a touch of drama. "But this will lift his spirits." Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. Not a single sign of hospital paperwork, discharge instructions, or a medical invoice on any surface. "What hospital is he going to?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Oh, that heart group near the university. Robert knows the details. Right on cue, my father appeared from his study, wearing khakis and moving like a man 10 years younger than his chart would suggest. He put on a show of emotion, clasped Leah's hand, and said, "This is a loan, sweetheart. We'll repay you. We're just so proud of the woman you've become." I'd heard that same tone before, always, just before the truth unraveled. Leah left the house glowing, like she had done something profoundly good. And she had. But over the next few weeks, while she pored over community college catalogs and new scholarship lists, I couldn't shake the feeling. They never mentioned the surgery again. When Leah called to check in, they pivoted to Kayla's graduation party. Then came the Instagram post ones that made my stomach drop. My mother, who barely touched Facebook, except to like church photos or share holiday recipes, suddenly posted an album titled Kayla's Graduation Surprise. One photo stopped me cold. Kayla grinning beside a brand new white Audi convertible, a massive red bow perched on the hood. The caption read, "Congratulations to our amazing granddaughter on her graduation. Enjoy your dream car and European adventure. So proud of your accomplishments." Leah saw it too. Wow, Kayla got a car. That's really generous of Aunt Stephanie and Uncle Alex. I nodded, my stomach tightening, but didn't say anything yet. Your cousins always had things handed to her, Mom Leah chided gently. Kayla's nice, just different from us. Her kindness made what came next all the more devastating. 3 weeks after Leah had transferred her savings, I ran into Stephanie at Westfield Mall while grabbing a new pair of scrubs on my lunch break. She was standing near the Nordstrom entrance, arms full of shopping bags, Coach, Sephora, Saks. Valerie, she called waving like we were old college friends. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you since Easter. I smiled tightly. Hey, Steph. How's Leah getting ready for Stanford? Her words hit like a slap. She's looking at community college now, I said carefully. Financial stuff. Stephanie blinked. Really? But she got into Stanford right. That's what Mom and Dad said. She did. But plans change. I wasn't about to launch into a health lie I hadn't created. Well, community college is totally practical, Stephanie replied breezily, the kind of statement only someone who's never clipped a grocery coupon makes. Kayla's so excited for UCLA, she continued. And with Mom and Dad's graduation gift, it all worked out perfectly. Gift. I repeated, an icy sensation rising in my chest. The graduation present they gave her, $37,000. Can you believe it? She beamed. She got the Audi she wanted, and we're using the rest for her Europe trip. 3 weeks. France, Italy, Greece, all first class. You know, Mom and Dad said they wanted her to start life with unforgettable experiences. My ears rang. $37,000, the exact amount Leah had handed over, thinking she was saving her grandfather's life. And here was my niece preparing for luxury hotels in the Amalfi Coast. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice not to tremble. When did they decide to give her that gift? Oh, Stephanie said, digging through her Kate Spade bag for her keys, right after Leah called to say she was helping with the surgery. Wasn't that just so thoughtful of her? Oh, months ago, Stephanie said brightly. They've been planning it since Christmas. They wanted something really special since Kayla's their only granddaughter going straight to a university. She must have caught the shift in my expression because she quickly backpedaled. I mean, their only granddaughter graduating this year. I forced a polite nod and mumbled something about a work emergency. 10 minutes later, I was in my car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, trembling, but I wasn't crying from sadness. It was fury, white-hot, bitter fury. They had lied. My parents had looked their granddaughter in the eyes and fabricated a medical emergency to steal her college fund and hand it to Kayla. They'd built the story, complete with emotional phone calls, urgency, false gratitude, every piece designed to break down Leah's defenses and weaponize her kindness. My hand shook as I dialed my father's number. He picked up on the fourth ring, sounding mildly annoyed. Robert Carson speaking. How was the surgery? I asked flatly. A pause. What? The heart surgery. The one Leah gave you her college fund for. The one that was so urgent you needed $42,000. A longer pause. Valerie, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie. I just saw Stephanie. I know about the car. The trip. The $37,000 you gifted Kayla. Silence. What happened to the heart surgery? Miracle cure the moment the check cleared. His voice turned icy. That money was a gift. Leah offered it. What we do with our finances is none of your concern. You told her you were desperate, that you couldn't pay. You said it was life or death. She needed to learn generosity. She was getting arrogant. Stanford this, Berkeley that. Kayla works hard too. She deserves something special. My jaw clenched. Kayla's never worked a day in her life. Leah's been saving since she was 12. Babysitting working weekends community college will be good for her character. He snapped. She's too ambitious. Just like you. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. For several minutes, I sat motionless in the car, the weight of betrayal crashing over me. This wasn't just about stolen money. It was about control, about sabotaging a girl's future just to elevate someone else. That evening, after dinner, I sat Leah down in the living room. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something about Grandpa's surgery. Her eyes widened. Is he okay? What happened? There was no surgery, I said quietly, holding her hands. There never was. I ran into Aunt Stephanie today. I said gently, your grandparents gave Kayla $37,000 for graduation, a brand new car and a first-class trip to Europe. They've been planning it for months. Leah's expression shifted confusion, then disbelief, and finally quiet devastation. But Grandpa, he cried. He said he might die without the surgery. They lied, I said, voice low. They knew what they were doing. They took your college fund with full awareness. Leah pulled her hands back and hugged herself. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe they were going to use Kayla's gift money for the surgery, but something changed. Maybe insurance covered it later. Even now, she was searching for any scenario where her grandparents weren't deliberate in their betrayal. I opened Stephanie's Facebook post and showed her the captions Kayla beaming in front of the Audi flight reservations, booked a month before the supposed medical emergency. Call them, I said quietly. Ask them yourself. Her hands trembled as she picked up her phone and placed it on speaker. When my father answered, Leah spoke carefully. Grandpa, how are you feeling after the surgery? A long, suffocating silence followed. Then he cleared his throat. Leah, sometimes adults make complicated decisions for the good of the family. Was there ever a surgery? She asked. Her voice was thin, barely audible. The money is being used wisely. Kayla has worked. Leah ended the call. She set her phone down with careful precision, stood up, and walked silently to her room. I found her a few minutes later, sitting on her bed, her Stanford acceptance letter crumpled in her lap. For years, she whispered, I gave up dances, sleepovers, summers. I worked birthdays. I didn't go to prom because I picked up a babysitting job that night. I haven't bought new jeans in 2 years. She looked at me, eyes shining with grief. All for nothing. I wrapped her in my arms as she finally broke. Leah sobbed until her whole body gave out every tear carrying the weight of stolen dreams. That night, I heard her tossing at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. By morning, her face was swollen, but her voice had sharpened. I want to call them, she said. I want to hear them say it. She dialed again at the kitchen table. You've always been taken care of, my mother said flatly. Kayla needed this more than you needed a fancy school. I earned that money, Leah replied. Every dollar. And now you've learned, my father snapped. Family comes first, not selfish ambition. When Leah ended the call, she turned to me with tearless, steady eyes. They don't think they did anything wrong, she said quietly. They really believe Kayla deserves my money more than I do. And in that moment, I watched something irreversible shift in her. Her belief in fairness and family loyalty cracked. What replaced it was a hard-earned clarity, one no 18-year-old should ever be forced to learn. A week later, my mother called to say they were hosting a graduation dinner for Kayla. The whole family's invited, she said lightly, as if nothing had happened. The message was clear. Show up, smile, and pretend the betrayal didn't exist. We're not going, I said the moment I hung up. But Leah surprised me. Actually, I think we should. I looked at her eyebrows raised. I want to look them in the eye, she said. I need to. I saw the same determination she'd shown when working overtime shifts or pushing through finals. This was closure, and she needed to claim it. That evening, we arrived at my parents' house right on time. Stephanie, Alex, and Kayla were already there, along with my parents' friends, the Martins and the Petrovics. The dining room sparkled under the chandelier, the table set with my mother's finest china and polished silver. A catered spread of expensive dishes lined the buffet. There she is, the graduate. My mother beamed as Kayla entered from the kitchen, entirely ignoring Leah's presence. Kayla looked stunning in a brand new designer dress, likely worth more than Leah's entire closet. During appetizers, Mrs. Martin leaned toward Leah. "Where are you heading to college, sweetheart?" Before Leah could answer, my father cut in. Leah's chosen a more practical path. Community college fits her better. Leah's grip tightened on her water glass, but she kept her voice calm. Actually, I was accepted to Stanford, with a partial scholarship. My mother let out a clipped laugh, but wisely reconsidered. Not everyone needs a pricey degree to find happiness. Throughout dinner, they passed around glossy printouts of Kayla's Audi and her European itinerary. 3 weeks in Paris, Rome and Santorini, my father boasted. Only the best for our Kayla. "Sounds expensive," Mrs. Petrovich commented. "Worth every penny," my mother replied without hesitation. These experiences shape successful young women. 10 minutes later, when Leah didn't return from the bathroom, I found her sitting still on the guest bed, hands folded. "I can't do this," she whispered. "They're flaunting it, Mom. Right in front of me." "My future paid for her vacation," Leah said flatly. I reached for her hand. "We can leave now. You don't owe anyone in that room another second." She nodded, brushing away a single tear, then stood with quiet strength. We returned to the dining room just as dessert was being served, an extravagant tiered cake reading, "Congratulations, Kayla." UCLA bound in shimmering violet frosting. "We need to head out," I said, helping Leah into her jacket. "Before cake," my mother said sharply. "That's rude." "Speaking of rude," I said, my voice tight, "I think conning your granddaughter out of her college fund qualifies." The room fell silent. The Martins and Petrovits exchanged awkward glances. "Valerie," my father warned, "this isn't the time or place." "Really? When is the right time to discuss how you faked a heart condition to steal from your granddaughter?" I asked dangerously. "Calm? Should we schedule that talk after Kayla's done spending Leah's future across Europe?" Stephanie gasped. "Wait! Dad said that money was a gift from Leah." "It wasn't, Leah," said her voice clear and steady. "He told me he needed emergency surgery, that he might die, that they could lose their house." I believed them. The Petrovich looked stunned. Mrs. Martin covered her mouth. Mr. Martin, who I knew sat on the church finance committee with my father, leaned forward. "Robert, is this true?" My father's face flushed. We were teaching Leah a lesson. She was becoming obsessed with materialism. "By lying to her," Mrs. Petrovich said, incredulous. "Sometimes families make tough decisions," my mother chimed in, ever smooth. "Leah will be fine," Melissa managed without help. "You mean I struggled for years while you doted on Stephanie?" I snapped. "Now you're doing the same to Leah." Kayla, who had been silent the whole evening, suddenly sat upright. "Wait. You told Leah you needed money for surgery. That's why she gave it to you." My mother gently touched her arm. "Don't worry about it, sweetie. Leah needed to learn life isn't always fair. This way," she added brightly, "you get the graduation you deserve and Leah learns about priorities. And what lesson is that I demanded? That kindness is a weakness. That your dreams come second to someone else's shopping spree." "You're being dramatic," my father said stiffly. "Leah can still go to college, just not Stanford. Sacrifices must be made for family." Leah's voice was a whisper, but it cut through the room. "Sacrifices. What are you giving up, Grandpa? Because from where I'm standing, It's only ever been us sacrificing for you. I worked for that money, Leah said, her voice rising with conviction. Every weekend, every summer since I was 12. I gave it to you because I thought Grandpa might die, and you took it, knowing exactly what it meant to me. My mother's expression tightened into a cold mask. You're being selfish, Leah. Kayla has worked just as hard. At what I snapped, unable to stay silent. What job has Kayla ever had? Kayla looked visibly uncomfortable, now her confidence cracking. I didn't know Aunt Valerie. I swear I didn't know the money was Leah's. It wasn't her money anymore. My father cut in firmly. She gave it to us. We chose to invest it in Kayla's future. End of discussion. Leah drew a breath, her gaze locked on her grandparents. You're right. This discussion is over. So is our relationship. She turned without another word, walking out of the dining room with more poise than most people twice her age. I followed close behind, but before I left, I turned back to the stunned faces in the room. You didn't just take her savings, I said clearly. You took her trust. You stole her future. That's something no check can replace. In the car, Leah's composure cracked. She cried into her hands, her shoulders trembling. They're not even sorry, Mom. She sobbed. They truly believe they did nothing wrong. I held her tightly, whispering what I couldn't say in front of the others. This isn't over. Robert and Elaine Carson had crossed a line, and for once, I would make sure they faced consequences. The next morning, Leah finally slept in, emotionally spent. I let her rest while I made coffee and opened my laptop. By noon, I had 3 pages of notes and a list of Omaha attorneys who specialized in financial exploitation. When Leah shuffled into the kitchen and poured herself a mug, she glanced at the table. What are you doing? Looking into our options, I said, flipping the notebook around to show her. What they did, it wasn't just unethical, it may have been illegal. Leah frowned. You think we can sue them? Not unless you want to, I replied gently. But we can speak with someone, just to understand where we stand. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, just to talk. 2 days later, we walked into the office of Grace Taylor, a well-regarded attorney recommended by one of the physicians at my clinic. And that's when everything really started to shift. If you've ever believed that the truth deserves its day, don't forget to subscribe, because what Leah and I uncovered next will leave you speechless. Grace listened closely as Leah calmly laid out everything. How Robert and Elaine had faked a medical emergency, persuaded her to transfer her college fund, and then redirected the money toward Kayla's graduation gifts. When she finished, Grace leaned forward, her expression firm. This is a textbook case of financial fraud, she said. They knowingly misrepresented a medical crisis to induce a transfer of funds. And because it's family, that actually strengthens the claim, not weakens it. What are our options? I asked. I can issue a formal demand letter, Grace replied. It would request repayment of the full amount plus interest. If they refuse, we'll move forward with a civil suit. Given the documentation and intent, I believe we'd have a very strong case. Would it go to court? Leah asked quietly. It could, Grace acknowledged. But most cases like this settle out of court, especially when the other party wants to avoid public exposure, particularly if they have standing in the community. We left her office with a plan. Grace would draft the demand letter and give my parents 10 days to repay the full amount with interest. That evening, I sat with Leah at the kitchen table. Before we send this, I said gently, you need to be clear about what you want. Is it just the money or something more? Leah was quiet for a long moment. I want the money back, she said. But more than that, I want them to acknowledge what they did. That it wasn't just legally wrong, it was morally wrong. I gave a sad smile. That part might be harder. I know, she whispered, but I still need to try. Over the next week, we gathered every shred of documentation, bank records, transfer receipts, voicemails from my father pleading for money, text messages about the emergency, and screenshots of social media posts showing the gifts planned for Kayla well in advance. Grace folded everything into a well-crafted demand letter. While we waited, I made a difficult choice. Quietly, I began speaking with a few people in my parents' circle church, friends, neighbors, old family acquaintances. Not gossiping, just answering honestly when they asked about Leah's college plans. Sadly, Leah had to decline Stanford, I'd say. She gave her college fund to my parents for a fake surgery. They used it to buy Kayla a car and a trip to Europe. The shock was universal. One call came from Stephanie Collins, my mother's bridge partner of 12 years. "Valerie," she said, her voice heavy. "Your mom did something similar to my nephew years ago. It nearly ruined him. Borrowed money for a supposed medical treatment for your father, then bought a timeshare in Florida." Stephanie Collins explained. "We never said anything back then. We were embarrassed." Her written statement about the prior incident added substantial weight to our case. Grace was confident it established a pattern of behavior. When Grace finalized the letter, Leah sat at the table and read every line before signing. The demand was simple: return the $42,000 plus 10% interest within 10 days, or face civil action and potential criminal investigation for fraud. "You're sure about this?" I asked gently, as she handed the document back. Leah nodded. "Even if they never admit what they did was wrong, they don't get to walk away from it." The letter was delivered by courier the next day. It didn't take long. By that evening, my mother called, her voice tight and shrill. "How dare you threaten your own parents with legal action after all we've done for you and Leah?" "This isn't a threat, Mom," I replied. "It's a consequence. What you did was fraud." "We did no such thing," she snapped. "Leah gave us that money." "Under false pretenses," I said. "You lied about needing heart surgery." "We never explicitly said it was for surgery," she argued. Leah assumed we have the voicemails, Mom, I cut in. "Dad said word for word he needed it for a life-saving procedure." Silence. Then, the pivot I'd been expecting. "You've always been jealous of your sister. This is just more drama because you can't stand to seeing Kayla succeed." I stayed calm. "This isn't about Kayla. It's about what you did to Leah. Return the money quietly, or we'll move forward. And everyone in your community will know the truth." "You wouldn't dare." 10 days, Mom. Make it right." After I hung up, the floodgates opened. Stephanie bombarded me with texts, furious that I was ruining Kayla's big moment. She accused me of jealousy, of disloyalty, and ended with, "Don't expect to be invited to anything again." "This isn't about you or Kayla," I messaged back. "It's about Mom and Dad manipulating Leah." "They were helping Kayla," she insisted. "Family helps family. Leah is family too. And they stole her future. You're being dramatic. She can still go to community college." The circular arguments exhausted me. No one on their side was capable of acknowledging the betrayal. Meanwhile, Leah grew quieter by the day, the uncertainty gnawing at her. "What if they don't pay Mom?" she whispered one night. "What if we actually have to go to court?" "Then we go to court," I told Leah, gently but firmly. "But remember what Grace said. Odds are they won't want this to become public." The waiting, though, was its own kind of torment. Every time Leah's phone buzzed, she jumped, half hoping for a message that said, "We're sorry." But it never came. Instead, my parents took a different approach. They began contacting mutual friends, trying to spin the story. Mrs. Petrovich, who'd been at the dinner, called to relay the guilt-laced plea, "Your grandparents are devastated. They never meant to hurt you." Leah didn't flinch. "Then they can return my college fund." As the deadline drew near, one bright light emerged: my friend Rachel. She brought dinner on nights when we were too emotionally wrung out to cook and sat beside Leah on the couch when the silence got too loud. "Whatever happens," she told Leah one night, "you stood up for yourself. That takes guts most adults don't have." The night before the deadline, I found Leah in the kitchen at 3 a.m., nervously stirring honey into a mug of tea. "What if this tears the family apart forever?" she whispered. I sat down beside her. "Sweetheart, they already tore it apart. When they lied, when they used you. We're just refusing to pretend it didn't happen." She nodded slowly. "I know. I just didn't think it would come to this. Neither had I." But as I held her hand across that old kitchen table, I knew we were doing what was right for Leah's future, but also for her self-respect. The next morning, a courier knocked on our apartment door. I signed for a thin envelope. No check. just a single sheet of paper. It was from my father's attorney, Franklin Reed. My clients Robert and Elaine Carson categorically deny all allegations of fraud or misrepresentation, the letter read. The funds in question were gifted voluntarily by Leah Carson with no conditions attached. However, to avoid family discord and legal costs, the Carsons are prepared to offer a partial repayment of $15,000 paid over 5 years contingent upon the signing of a non-disclosure agreement and full release of claims. Leah's face crumpled. They're still pretending they did nothing wrong. And that offer, with strings attached, I added, furious. I called Grace immediately. "This is common," she said calmly. "They're testing your resolve. But we move forward." That afternoon, Grace filed the suit. And the next day, my parents were served at home by a process server named Vanessa, who later told me, "Your mother's face, absolutely priceless." The phone started ringing within the hour. First came my father huffing into the phone about ungrateful daughters and frivolous lawsuits. Then my mother called, switching between tearful guilt trips and sharp-edged threats, like a well-practiced routine. Finally, Stephanie erupted screaming that I was tearing the family apart. Through it all, Leah stayed remarkably composed. "They still don't get it." "Do they?" she said after I hung up on Stephanie. "They actually believe they had a right to my money. People like your grandparents," I explained, "don't think rules apply to them. They're used to control and getting away with it." The next development caught us by surprise. 3 days after the suit was filed, Kayla showed up at our apartment without warning. She stood awkwardly in designer jeans, clutching her Michael Kors purse like a shield. "Can I talk to Leah?" she asked when I opened the door. I looked over my shoulder. Leah gave a small nod. "I'll be in my room if you need me," I said gently, stepping aside but keeping the door open just in case. Later, Leah recapped the conversation. It had been honest, if uncomfortable. "I knew they were giving me money," Kayla admitted, "but they said it was from their retirement. That they wanted to invest in my future." "You didn't know it was my college fund?" Leah had asked. "I'd like to think it would have mattered," Kayla said, eyes down. "I'm not proud of how this happened. I'm not a bad person." "Spoiled." "Yeah, but I wouldn't steal your future if I'd known." Leah said Kayla looked genuinely upset. "The car and trip feel tainted," she'd said. "And Mom and Dad are furious about the lawsuit. They say Grandma and Grandpa were just being generous to me and that you're being selfish." "Do you believe that?" Leah had asked. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Kayla said quietly. "But if someone tricked me out of my future, I'd be mad too." Before leaving, Kayla gave Leah a quick, hesitant hug. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am." That visit stayed with Leah. "She's just a product of her environment," she said thoughtfully. "We had to learn self-reliance. She was taught entitlement." 1 week after the lawsuit was served, another message arrived, this time from my father, requesting a private meeting. He proposed neutral ground, the office of Thomas Walker, a respected mediator and family friend. Grace advised caution, but encouraged us to attend. "Let me come with you," she said. Leah agreed immediately. "I want to hear what they have to say." To my face. The meeting was set for Saturday. We were ready. We arrived at Thomas Walker's office to find my parents already seated at the polished conference table. Robert and Elaine Carson looked stiff and irritable, their lawyer Franklin Reed seated beside them with a neat folder and an unreadable expression. Stephanie and Alex were nowhere in sight. "Thank you all for agreeing to meet." Thomas began formally, his voice calm and measured. "I hope today we can find a peaceful resolution." My father cleared his throat, his tone tight. "This lawsuit is hurtful and unnecessary. We're family. Families don't take each other to court. Families also don't commit fraud," Grace replied smoothly. "Your granddaughter worked for years to save for college. You fabricated a medical crisis, took her money and used it to fund luxury items for a different grandchild. That's not family, it's exploitation." "Leah gave us that money willingly," my mother argued. "Under false pretenses, I cut in. That's the definition of fraud." "We always planned to help Leah with school," my father insisted. "Just not that overpriced California school." Leah, who had remained quiet until now, sat forward, her voice steady. "When were you planning to help?" "After I settled for less, after I buried my dream because you decided it was too expensive." They exchanged glances, caught off guard by her calm defiance. "Your aunt and uncle couldn't afford the gifts Kayla deserved," my mother said, as if that justified it. "We were trying to balance the needs of the family." "By stealing from me?" Leah asked. "How is that balance?" Franklin Reed tried to redirect. "The Carsons are willing to increase their offer to $25,000 payable immediately, same non-disclosure agreement." Grace shook her head without hesitation. "Our demand remains full repayment of $42,000 plus 10% interest and legal fees." "That's absurd," my father snapped. "We don't have that kind of money anymore." "Then you shouldn't have spent Leah's savings on Kayla's car and European vacation," I replied calmly. "You created this. You can fix it." "Sell the car," Leah added. "Cancel the trip. Sacrifice like I would have had to." Their stunned expression said it all. The idea of Kayla sacrificing anything had never crossed their minds. "We can't do that to her," my mother protested. "It would break her heart." "And breaking mine didn't matter?" Leah asked quietly. The conversation circled endlessly. Denial, blame, guilt, excuses. After nearly an hour, Thomas finally called for a break. In the hallway, Grace pulled us aside, her tone low and direct. "They're starting to realize this isn't going away," Grace said as we stepped into the hallway. "The fact that they increased their offer shows they're feeling pressure." "Should we consider it?" Leah asked, her voice weary but steady. "That's entirely your choice," Grace replied. "But keep in mind, if we go to court, it becomes public record. And based on everything I've seen, your grandparents care deeply about their image in the community." Leah was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "I want what's fair. I want all of my money back. They can figure out how to make that happen." When we reconvened in the conference room, Grace wasted no time. "My client's position remains unchanged," she stated firmly. "Full restitution, $42,000 plus 10% interest within 7 days. Otherwise, we proceed to court." My father leaned forward, his expression hard. "You realize this means neither of you will ever be welcome in our home again." Leah didn't flinch. "I realized that the day I found out you lied to me about needing heart surgery, Grandpa." For just a breath, something in my father's eyes shifted. Was it guilt? Maybe. But then he straightened again, lips tight. "We'll need time to consider," Franklin Reed replied formally. 7 days, Grace repeated. After that, we moved forward with discovery, including complete financial records for the last 5 years. That last part clearly rattled my parents. Money had always been their closely guarded domain. We left the meeting without resolution, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, they were on defense. "What now?" Leah asked as we drove home. "Now we wait," I said. But judging from their reaction, I think they'll pay. The next several days were tense. Stephanie called repeatedly, her tone swinging wildly between begging and blaming. "Do you want Mom and Dad to lose the house?" "Because of you," she snapped. "They spent Leah's money on Kayla's luxuries," I replied calmly. "That's on them." On the 6th day, Thomas called. "The Carsons have agreed to pay the full amount plus interest. They want to deliver the check in person." Grace shook her head. "No private meetings. Have them send it to my office. I'll verify it." The next morning, a cashier's check for $46,200 arrived at Grace's office, along with a typed note. "This payment is made without admission of wrongdoing, solely to preserve family harmony. We expect this matter to remain private within the family." There was no apology, not even a single word of remorse. No apology, no accountability. Just a check-cold clinical restitution with no recognition of the emotional wreckage they caused. When Grace called to confirm the funds had cleared, Leah sat silently on the couch, staring out the window. "It doesn't feel like a victory," she said softly, after a long pause. "It's not," I replied, wrapping an arm around her. "But it is justice. You stood up for yourself. You made them face consequences. That's something no one can take from you." Leah nodded slowly. "I guess I was hoping they'd finally see me, understand what they did." "They won't," I said gently. People like my parents rarely do. They live in their own version of truth. That night, I found Leah in her room, holding her Stanford acceptance letter again, but this time there was a flicker of peace in her expression. I called admissions today, she said, her voice steadier. They told me I can still enroll this fall if I confirm by the end of next week. For the first time in months, I saw hope light up her face again. The money couldn't undo the betrayal, but it could fulfill its original purpose, giving Leah the future she'd earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. With the college fund restored and her spot at Stanford reconfirmed, we finally began to rebuild. Leah threw herself into preparing for campus life with a focused energy. Still, the trauma lingered in quiet ways. I keep checking my account, she confessed, while we were out shopping for dorm supplies. Like I'm afraid it'll vanish again. It won't, I promised. It's protected now. I know that. Logically. But emotionally, it's just hard to trust again. That was what worried me most. The part of her that used to believe in people, the part that always assumed love meant safety, had been shaken. 2 weeks after receiving the funds, we got an unexpected knock at the door. It was Stephanie. She looked different. Less put together, no glossy lipstick or statement heels. Her voice was small when she asked, "Can we talk?" Leah was out with friends, so I let her in. We sat in the living room, the tension as thick as silence. Mom and Dad had to pull from their retirement to pay Leah back. She started clearly expecting sympathy. That was their choice, I said evenly. They could have sold the Audi or canceled the Europe trip. Stephanie flinched. Kayla offered to do that, actually. She told them to sell the car and give the money back to Leah. That surprised me. I raised an eyebrow. What did they say? That it wasn't her responsibility to fix this. Stephanie said, her voice flat. They told her they'd handle it. She twisted her wedding ring, something I hadn't seen her do since we were kids. Mark and we've been talking about things we never questioned before. What things, I asked gently. The favoritism, the manipulation, the way Mom and Dad have always played us against each other. I used to think being the favorite meant I'd won something. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. But watching this unfold, maybe I was just the one they could control more easily. It was probably the most honest moment Stephanie and I had ever shared. For the first time, she seemed to see our parents for who they really were, not generous pillars of the community, but deeply manipulative people who used affection like a leash and money as bait. They're already talking about helping Kayla buy a house after college, she added. I used to feel grateful. Now I wonder what strings will come with it. There are always strings, I said quietly. That's why I kept my distance all these years. I didn't want Leah growing up under their influence. Stephanie nodded slowly. You were right, she admitted. I just couldn't see it before. Before she left, she asked, would Leah be willing to talk to Kayla? She feels awful. She didn't know where the money came from. That's Leah's decision, I said firmly. I won't push her. That night, I told Leah about the conversation. She thought for a moment. I believe Kayla didn't know. She said softly, and it's not her fault Grandma and Grandpa played favorites. The following weekend, Leah met Kayla at a local coffee shop. When she came home, her expression was thoughtful. How'd it go? I asked. Better than I expected, Leah replied. Kayla actually apologized. And I mean, really apologized. She said she's been thinking about all the times Grandma and Grandpa showered her with gifts while ignoring me, and she feels awful for not noticing. That's big of her. Leah nodded. She canceled the Europe trip, said she couldn't enjoy it knowing how it was paid for. She took a receptionist job instead. That's a big change, I said. This whole thing, Leah said, woke up a lot of people, including her. Over the next few weeks, she began journaling about boundaries, financial independence, and how love shouldn't come with a price tag. When her friend Maya started facing pressure from relatives who wanted to borrow her graduation money, Leah was the one who stepped in to help her set boundaries. The most important thing I learned, Leah told her gently, is that real love doesn't take your dreams from you. It helps you reach them. My parents never reached out. Not a call, not a letter. Through Stephanie, I heard they were telling friends we had extorted money from them and were now refusing contact out of cruelty. Their version conveniently skipped over the fact that they lied to Leah to take her college fund in the first place. Before leaving for Stanford, Leah decided to write one final letter. She handed it to me before sealing the envelope. I read it slowly, my chest aching with pride and heartbreak. Dear Grandma and Grandpa, I'm writing not to continue the conflict, but to find closure. What hurt me most wasn't losing the money. It was realizing you valued my future so little. I trusted you with something sacred, and you chose a car and a vacation over that trust. I don't expect you to understand how deeply that wounded me. I don't even expect an apology. But I've learned a lot from this experience. I've learned that my worth isn't defined by anyone else, that setting boundaries isn't selfish, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or letting people hurt me again. I forgive you not for your sake, but for mine. I refuse to carry anger with me to college. But that forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you again. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. I wish you well, but I need to protect myself. Maybe someday, if you're willing to truly acknowledge what you did, we could build something new, something honest. Until then, I'm focusing on my future, the one I worked for and fought to preserve. She signed it simply Leah and mailed it the next morning. No reply ever came. August arrived sooner than I expected. The morning we packed the car for the drive to California, I looked at Leah taller, somehow more grounded. "Are you ready?" I asked as we loaded her boxes into the trunk. She paused at the door of our apartment, her gaze drifting around the place we'd called home for years. "I think so," she said. "Not just for college, for whatever's next. I'm proud of you, Leah. Not just for Stanford, for all of it." She hugged me tight. "I had a good example, Mom. You never let anyone define your worth. You taught me to stand up for myself by showing me how it's done." Leah's words echoed in my mind as we crossed into California. Her belongings packed neatly in the back of the car, the skyline of her new life just hours ahead. She was quiet for a long stretch of highway, gazing out at the hills before finally speaking again. "I've been thinking about what I've learned from all this." "Yeah," I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. "That family isn't about blood," she said. "It's about who stands by you when it counts, who sees your worth and respects your dreams." She turned toward me with a soft smile. "By that definition, you're my only real family. And honestly, that's enough." It wasn't the ending I'd once hoped for. There was no heartfelt apology from my parents, no tearful reunion where they recognized the damage they'd caused. But Leah's peace, her clarity, was worth more than any forced reconciliation. She had learned to value herself, and that was everything. 3 months into her first semester, Leah called one evening, breathless with excitement. "I had dinner with Kayla last weekend," she said casually. "Oh, she drove down to visit. It was actually really good. She's changed. Working part-time, paying her own way. She told me Aunt Stephanie and Uncle Alex are setting boundaries with Grandma and Grandpa now, too. Of all the possible outcomes, that ripple effect may have been the most unexpected. Leah's courage had quietly begun shifting dynamics throughout our entire family. Today, Leah is thriving at Stanford, majoring in psychology. She hopes to become a counselor, specializing in family trauma. "I want to help other people recognize manipulation and learn how to set boundaries," she told me recently. "Sometimes love means standing firm against people who try to shrink you." As for my parents, they carry on more isolated now than they've ever been. According to Stephanie, they rarely mention Leah or me, as if pretending we don't exist makes it easier to avoid facing their own actions. But that's their story to live with. What Leah and I learned is this: healing doesn't always look like hugs and reunions. Sometimes healing means walking away, choosing peace over proximity, truth over tradition, and understanding that your value doesn't change just because someone else refuses to see it. Leah's journey taught us both that real love never comes with a price tag, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, "No more." If Leah's story moved you, like it moved me, if you've ever had to fight for your worth or walk away from people who should have protected you, leave her a comment below. Let her know her strength matters. Share your story, your advice, or just your encouragement. And if you're facing a similar situation, remember, this standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by respect. Subscribe to stay with us through more journeys like Leah's, and never forget you deserve love that doesn't ask you to shrink. You deserve peace. You deserve you.